Welcome to Unit 6 of the Switched On Computing Samples, and this one's called We Are Game Designers, and it's aimed to show your students how to use Kodu to develop some computer games, but they'll also learn about some basic techniques and some basic algorithms during this process. So in this unit, you'll need to use a number of different tools. For starters, you'll have to get the files that are part of the CD. You also need Kodu, Microsoft Word. Now, Xbox controllers, let me stress, they are optional. Now, particularly for the boys, if you're trying to get them engaged in your IT lesson, they'll love them. But you can still use the keyboard and mouse, so really don't worry. In terms of hardware, you will need either laptops or computers, but just to let you know that on the Surface tablet, Microsoft have got a Surface RT version of Kodu, and you can export your games and play them elsewhere. And the outcome is going to be that the game can be set in another world, and it can be designed with packaging as well. So what are students going to be doing in this unit? Well, they're going to learn the basics of the visual programming language called Kodu. Now, it's a great opportunity, and actually if they really get into it, there's opportunities for them to enter the Kodu Cup, where they can actually get an opportunity to win prizes and also meet some famous people in the games industry. So they will have the opportunity to run their own game studio, and they will be able to design the packaging for their game. Now, with regards to it linking, obviously it links into the computing modules. You can design and write and debug programs to accomplish different goals. So, for example, you could get them coding for Kodu to pick up apples. You're going to teach them about the sequencing of programs and how things are done in a particular order. And there's also an opportunity to talk about algorithms. So you can relate this to how instructions need to be detailed enough to be carried out. You could, for example, blindfold your students and get them to give each other instructions, and they'll see how detailed they need to be. But also they need to be discerning in evaluating digital content. So there will be opportunities in this unit for them to evaluate the work that they have produced. Kodu has a really good link into English, and unfortunately not everybody sees it. But the great thing about it is you can actually get your students to play the games, make the games, but then they can write their background story. So that will really help out with your English literature. It will also help out with your creative writing, and it might get your students more interested in what they're doing. You can have them develop their characters and give each of their characters a background story. So it could be the evil Natasha that's about to come and invade a certain world, or these are the type of things that you could get your students to think about, and you could even get them stimulus such as other games to play. So like I said before, there's links to literacy. There's obviously art and design, because if they're designing their characters, they're sketching them, they're saying what they want them to look like, and they're basically setting up each of the characters within their games. Now, there's numeracy, because they're going to be working on logic and movement, sequencing, but also you could also introduce operators to them, so greater than or less than. Now, one of the big links for me is that you can link it into design technology. Now, if you get makey kits, and you can get them for around 33 to 40 pounds now, you can hook these up to your computer, and you can see that they've got the up, down, left, right keys, they've got the space bar, the click, but they've also got the W, A, S and D key, which you can hook up to different items, and you can get your students to design their own controller. If you want more information on that, feel free to email me, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Or go along to AskTheMusicTeacher.com and find out about some of the amazing work that Gareth Ritter has been doing. So what do we expect our students to get from this? Well, when you're making a piece of software, you need to know what the requirements are, and you also need to know who it's for, so you can plan for the audience. So that's one of the big things here. They're going to use a piece of software to build their 3D world. And again, as mentioned previously, they're going to create a sequence of instructions with an outcome. They're also going to develop an understanding through testing, and they're going to evaluate and refine their work. Now there's many ways you can do this. You can either get them to make surveys on their games to get feedback, or you can actually get real life testing and get them to play each other's games and do the whole 2 stars and a wish thing. So that's what we're aimed to get out of this. So some of the sources that you're going to need, you're going to need Kodu for a start. And whether it's on a Surface tablet, whether it's on your Windows computer, you're going to need that. Now, like I said, the controllers are optional. You can use your keyboard and mouse. But for teaching things like algorithms, you can get apples or balls. And don't forget that there are the built-in tutorials with this, which you can follow through the presentation with. Not to mention, with the switched on computing resources, there are plenty of sheets to help you through this. So, the preparation you'll need to make sure you got your controllers. One idea that I do with some of my older students, with my Year 10 students, is we have to make mood boards to kind of decide what our story is going to be about. What's the background to our game? What are we going to need? That might be a good idea for your students, and it would be a good way of linking in art, getting them to do some craft. You can have Microsoft Word, which is available through a web app, so you don't necessarily need to worry about installing it either if you've got OneDrive. There's game design templates available with the scheme of work, and not to mention Xbox games might be useful if you want to talk about features that are in some of the games that are out there. So what's the first lesson all about? Well, it's about getting programming. It's about getting students to feel like they're Kodu. So what you need to do are in the lesson plans and documents provided, but the children will be given a scenario and they have to come up with their game design studio. Now it works great with year 3 or 4, and what you can do is show them some examples of a Kodu game and let them play it, because then they'll see what the type of thing they're going to do. Now to introduce the algorithm to them, because an algorithm is a set of unambiguous instructions, so it's really detailed and they need to understand it. Now what I've done with students before is I've got them to put their tie around their eyes and get other students to give them instructions to get objects around the room, such as picking up apples. And for example, when a student says to them, turn left, well, the student keeps turning in a circle because they haven't told them how many degrees to turn left. And you can kind of get your point across to kind of explain that, well, your details need to be your instructions need to be in enough detail, and if they're not, then the student's not going to get to where they need to go. And programming works the same way. And you can discuss the commands that they gave each other, and then you can get them onto Kodu, give them some instructions, get them doing getting the Kodu to move with the control or the arrows, and get them bumping into things to see what happens when you interact with objects. So, like I said before, you can get your students to program each other, and you can say, well, if you collect the green ball, then throw it at another student so that they can carry on, and you can just keep it as a cycle going for the time being. Now for homework, you can get them to write a series of commands that allow them to get from one end of the house to the other. So you can imagine that you could get them to say, program their parents and then write down the instructions. Or you could get them to write down an algorithm for brushing their teeth in the morning so that they can see how the sequence of instructions goes.
We're going to add to our program so that whenever Kodu sees an apple, he moves towards it. Then, when he bumps into the apple, we want him to eat it. At the same time, we want to increment a score counter. Click play to run the game.
So you've just seen a short clip there that explains how to use Kodu. And that's the type of thing that you'll do in your first lesson with them. Get them seeing apples, getting them moving towards them. But now what we're going to do is get Kodu to navigate and add objects to the world. So you can watch the tutorial that I've just shown you, okay? And you can show your students how to code the actions that they're doing. You can also show them how to add different objects. It doesn't just have to be the apple. You could get them adding in castles and get them to demonstrate how they can code the world. For example, if bump into castle, say, oh, go and find a tree. So you could kind of do a kind of treasure hunt. So you could get them experimenting. Well, if you bump into a tree, the tree says go to the castle. If you bump into the castle, it says go to the factory. So it challenged them to try different objects in their game. So when the students are doing this task, you can challenge them to edit the code so that if Kodu doesn't see any apples, he keeps searching for more. You can also get him to bump into other objects and try and play with the game win and game over functions. But you can also try and challenge your children to kind of look at different color apples to have different reactions. So if he eats a brown apple, he can say, oh, that was disgusting. But if he eats a green apple, maybe he gets some health or he gets a point. Now for homework, you can challenge them to create an imaginary world of their own, and you can get them to be as outrageous as you want. I've seen some teachers that have got their students to actually, they've kind of left it open to see what they come up with, let their imagination go wild. There was one student that actually made a whole kind of clay model of what they want their world to look like, which was really awesome. So they're the type of things that you could do with your students and kind of develop this project.
Resume takes you to where you were the last time you used Kodu. To add an object, make sure you're in Edit mode, click the Object tool, and then click an empty space. A Selection Pie menu displays. A black arrow denotes a submenu. Click an object to add it. Then click and drag to position it. Right-clicking an object displays a menu. You can resize an object or copy and paste to add more of the same. Let's also add the Kodu character to our world. Don't forget to save any changes you have made.
So you've just seen a little video that talks about how to play with objects. But also, what we're going to do in the next lesson is, now that they would have done the homework to kind of develop their world and say what they want it to look like, you can explain to the students that they're going to try and create that world now. So you're going to show them how to create their empty world, how to add in trees, water, all of those things, and you're going to show them the settings and how you can, say, make the world darker or how you can make it brighter. So this lesson you're going to give them a lot of fun and a lot of time to just explore Kodu and change the settings and make the land smooth and make it the way they want their game to be. So the next video you're going to see is going to introduce how to use the landscape and show the world. But what the children can do is they can, again, paint a picture or draw a map of their game world if they haven't done it for homework. But you can also get them to use Play-Doh in a lesson and work together. Maybe if they're a game design studio, they'll want to combine all three of their ideas that they did for homework so that they've got a happy medium. So they can do 2 landscape images, one of peace and one of fear for homework. So you're getting them to think about how you can change the way your world looks. So it could be a scary one or a fun one. But also get them to think about what causes these different moods. I mean, you could link that into literature and kind of talk about how stories give off like happy feelings or bad feelings and relate that to the way the world looks.
From the Kodu main menu, you can either load an existing world or create a new one. Edit with the toolbar options at the bottom. Use the ground brush tool to add ground. Choose a brush type and style of ground and paint by holding down the left mouse button. To delete ground, use the right mouse button. Choose the up-down tool to make hills and valleys. And the flatten tool to level them out. Click play to run the world you have created. Save your world from the home menu.
So now you're going to get your characters to move. So show your students how to get the programming bar up and get them to make a sequence to move to certain objects. And once they've got this, they can run the game and ask students to suggest improvements. So how could they make the game even more effective? It might be, for example, if they've got over 5 points, so you can use the operators, then if they've got over 5 points that the game is over, or another level opens, because it's good to kind of teach them how to open up another level that they can warp to. So as part of this lesson, you might want to extend your students to get them using the path feature, because when you put a path down, you can actually get an enemy go backwards and forward along this path all the time and kind of use them as a barricade. And these are the type of features that will make their games more interactive and more engaging for others to play. So ask your students for homework to reflect on what they've created so far, and they can think of a number of different things that they would like to include so they can continue improving their game.
Let's program Kodu so we can control his movements with the keyboard. With the Object tool selected, right-click on Kodu and choose Program. We want Kodu to respond to the arrow keys. The action we want Kodu to do is move. Let's add another line so that when we press the spacebar, Kodu jumps. Before you run your program, you may want to change the camera mode to a fixed position. Click play to run the program and test your code.
So they've done quite a few lessons now, and they're actually starting to see the results of the movement, of bumping into other objects. But it's good that students do testing. Now, all programmers do this, whether they've been in the industry for years or whether they're at GCSE level. Everybody has to do this, and this is to make sure there aren't any bugs or glitches in the games. Now, I'm sure if you speak to some of the boys and say the word glitch, they'll understand that, yeah, they've had problems with games that they've played before. And you can talk about how that's caused through bad programming and through bad testing. And if you don't want people to cheat or get around your game, you need to thoroughly test it and test it and test it to stop that from happening. So with this in mind, during this lesson, you should allow the children time to play each other's games and give feedback and spot any errors. It might be that one student hasn't included any instructions, so they don't know how to play it. And they should use the time to refine their games and make them even better. So one thing that you could do is you could test their audience. So you could actually get some of the younger year groups. Say, for example, you did this in year 4, you could get maybe year 2 up to play the games and give them some feedback. Or you could even do a showcase with the parents where you get them all in to play the games, and all the kids can do a kind of Dragon's Den in front of all the parents and show off their games and say what was good, what they've learned from their experience. Now, for homework, to link in with literacy, what you can do is get them to write a blurb for their game. And as a resource, I recommend bringing in some existing games. If you can get some off friends, you can photocopy the back. I know there's copyright, but if you just photocopy the back and show that to what the students look like, you can obviously get rid of them later so you're not distributing them and so on. But that would be a good idea for some stimulus for the students to look at. Now, with any game, we need to advertise it. We need people to understand what the game's about. So there's ways that you could do this. You can obviously do videos and do video editing and teach them those skills that you've done in some of the other tutorials we've shown you so far. But get the students to think about their packaging so they can explain that they're game designers, all right? And they have to persuade people. So you could do a literacy lesson on persuasive language. So things that would get people to pick that game up. So like big board writing that says amazing or awesome and so much fun. And you can demonstrate how to open a cover design and how to edit it. So you can use any software for that really. And that's all about digital literacy, teaching them that they can use Publisher or Word. There's lots of tools out there, and you just have to help them understand that they need to just pick the correct one. So they can develop their design and then write their short blurb on there. So some students in this lesson could do a poster, but some students will want to write and record radio adverts or video adverts for their games. And I say, with this, you can leave it open. If you've got enough devices or you've got enough technology, you can say to students, well, you can do a video, a poster, or a radio advert, and you can get them, or you could get them in working in groups of 3, and they've got to do all different media. So it's up to you how you approach it and what time you have. Now for homework, you should get them to reflect on their experience. Now I suggest for some of the lower end students that you kind of give them the questions to answer rather than just saying evaluate your work. So it might be, what went well? What would you improve on your game? What did you find difficult? Why did you find that difficult? So give them some leading questions to help them think about that. So what we expect students to get out of this is obviously everybody will explore the Kodu world, they'll do some amount of programming, and they'll be able to change the appearance of objects. Now, with students that start really progressing with this, those students will have a landscape, they'll have code for a specific purpose, and that's where we're saying, well, you must include a code that moves, when he sees an apple, he collects them all. So that's some code for a specific purpose. And again, refining their game based on the feedback that they've given. Now, some of your higher ability students are going to make these amazing games where, again, you've used paths and you've put enemies moving backwards and forwards in a loop, and have had a variety of tools to create their moods. Now you could get them to print screen it and type up all the features that make their game look really good, or you could get them to do a PowerPoint to say, well, I've included this feature to make it look scary. I've included this sound in it to make it sound like it's mysterious. And again, refine the game based on feedback of others. So that's some of the things that you'll be looking for. So this is pretty much the end of the series of Switched On Computing tutorials. I hope that you've had something useful for this. Like I said, with this, they'll be evaluating their games. They'll be designing them for specific goals, so they can pick their target audience. Now, there's various forms of inputs and outputs, so they could either use the controller, they can use the keyboard, they can use scores as input, so if the score is greater than or less than 5, and obviously the output is whatever happens because of this. They'll be designing their games, debugging them. Debugging basically means if there's errors in their code, they'll fix it. Now, you can get your students to actually show evidence of that by using the snipping tool or taking a print screen of a problem in the game and then showing how they fixed it. I mean, I do that with year 7 to show that, to get them to show me how they've been doing their problem solving, but it's up to you whether you do that with year 3 or 4. And again, there's different methods of assessment. We've got peer assessment, so we will be doing that. You'll be giving students some feedback from time to time and helping them out. So if you have a kind of progress tracker with your students with the progress pathways, you can put the word VA in there to say that you've observed that student doing it. And you can even get the students to write a response to what you've said. And again, we've got the what went well and even better if. So there's lots of assessment opportunities out there, so you don't need to be scared of them. Now there's 2 more tutorials at the end of this video, and I hope you've enjoyed this series of tutorials for the switched on computing samples that have been distributed. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email. Thanks for your time.
Kodu objects can be programmed to move along predefined paths. Choose the Path tool. Add nodes to create the path you want your object to follow. Let's add a balloon as our object. Right-click and choose Program. We want the balloon to always move on the path. Click Escape, then run the program. The balloon will now keep moving, but only along its path. Here we're going to look at adding a time-based action. Let's program the balloon to create and drop an apple every 2 seconds. The condition we want to check for is a timer, set to a time of 2 seconds. The action we want the balloon to do is to create an apple. Press Escape and run the program to test it.